Oke. Bagaimana Bapak Ibu semua? Sudah sudah join di Zoom kita? Sebentar lagi kita akan apa namanya? eh, akan mendengarkan paparan dari Pak Gindo mengenai data, mengenai apa namanya stata dan seterusnya yang tentu saja ini eh, apa namanya materi ini sangat 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 menarik dan sangat penting di mana kita akan mengikutinya mudah-mudahan sampai dengan selesai. Namun demikian eh, nanti jikalau Bapak Ibu sedikit agak kelelahan, tidak masalah. Tadi Pak Gindo sudah setuju. Mungkin sekitar 5 menit kita akan melakukan gerakan-gerakan untuk peregangan supaya kita lebih rileks begitu ya. Terima kasih dan saya kira eh, apa namanya Pak Gindo sudah siap. Dipersilahkan eh, untuk Pak Gindo. Silahkan Pak.
Terima kasih Pak Sus. Saya mau memperkenalkan diri dulu. Nama saya Gindo Tampu Bolon. Saya dari Universitas Manchester. Dan seperti yang disampaikan oleh Pak Sus tadi, dalam 5 jam ke depan. Kedengarannya panjang sekali ya, tetapi ini kita bagi dua, dan saya mungkin hanya ngomong sekitar 45 menit. Dan kalau ada pertanyaan, silakan ditanya nanti di ujung dari setiap sesi. Saya dibantu oleh kawan-kawan dalam 2 hari ini, dibantu oleh kawan-kawan yang mungkin sudah pernah dengar namanya, atau kalau belum saya perkenalkan. Ada Mas Aldi, ada Mas Esa, ada Mas Puguh, dan ada Mas Bagas. Gitu. Lengkapnya nanti boleh tanya sama Pak Sus, sama Pak Bagus. Ya, nggak ketukar. Pak Bagus itu dari Madep, bukan asisten saya, itu juragan saya. Kalau asisten saya itu Mas Bagas. Gitu. Yang Bagus itu juragan, yang Bagas itu asisten. I will share with you some of the thoughts I have about malnutrition in Indonesia, and also share with you some materials on doing analysis with malnutrition in Indonesia. And I hope by the end of it, you are familiar with some analysis that I have been doing on malnutrition, and also some data sources that I have used in the past on doing analysis, not only on malnutrition, but a whole host of other things on Indonesia, such as mental health or social media. I want to tell you a little bit more about myself so that you know where my ideas come from. I tend to work mostly on dementia in America, Europe, and Britain. So if you look at all my papers, which I think I can share with you the list. So I put on the chat the URL for the database in the US, where all researchers on health listed their papers. So if someone says that he or she is a researcher and studying health, you can go to that place and put his name or her name, and you can see all their papers. So that's what I have just shared. Pardon? So I was muted. So that's the place where if you want to check whether someone is actually producing, writing, communicating science, that's where you go. Find out whether they have published anything. If you can see there, you will find that I write or I study mostly Europe, America, but I'm also an Indonesian. So I do a little bit on Indonesia. So some of my papers are on Indonesia. And so that's why I'm here. But more specifically, I'm here because a few years ago, in fact, 5 years ago, I wrote a paper on the double burden of malnutrition in Indonesia. So if you put that on your favorite search engine, the double burden of malnutrition in Indonesia, you will see that that's the highest cited papers on the double burden of malnutrition in Indonesia. And it gives me no pleasure at all that malnutrition is still a problem in Indonesia after I wrote that paper. So I'm not proud of that. I'm sad because despite all that, malnutrition is still a problem in Indonesia. What I am going to do today is to help you to solve that problem. So what I'm going to do today in particular is to show you for the first time how big a problem is that. How do we know, or what is the benchmark, whether that is a problem and how big is it a problem? I will show you how much damage it does to GDP, gross domestic product. 20 years later, after we found out that someone is stunted, one form of malnutrition, or when someone is underweight, another form of malnutrition, or when someone is wasted, yet another form of malnutrition. How much damage does it do to Indonesian gross domestic product 20 years later if someone is malnourished? So this is the first evidence that I'm aware of 20 years effect of malnutrition in Indonesia on gross domestic product. And I explore a little bit also about the effect of malnutrition on IQ, something that you are all very fond of in Indonesia, I know, and the effect of malnutrition on depression, also something that I have written about in Indonesia and in America. So today and tomorrow you will hear about that. You will see the first time evidence of that. You will work with data that I have worked with. So potentially in a few years' time, you can also publish papers using this data source, as I have published a number of papers using this data source. They're all available for free. There is no restriction, no requirement, only your creativity and perseverance. And I will share with you, with the help of colleagues, how to analyze that. I cannot promise you that you will be able to publish in that database I showed you earlier, but certainly you're on the track should you choose to work hard at it. Now, I was required to train in English. Of course, I speak, I communicate, I think, I dream mostly in English. I've been in this country for some time now, but for very important things in my talk in the next day or two, for very important things, I will emphasize it in 3 different languages. So I will use English, Indonesian, and Batak if it is very, very important. And similarly, if you want to ask me a question, you can ask in any of those 3 languages. I use them all every day. So do not feel that you have to ask in English. If you are more comfortable to ask me in any of those 3 languages, you are more welcome to use any of them. One very important tip that I always encourage Indonesians in particular, as opposed to other students from other countries. I trained 13 PhD students. None of them failed, and they come from all over the world. There are not only Indonesians, but also Dutch, Chilean, other European countries, and so on. But I emphasize specifically to Indonesians that I want to encourage you to ask questions, because if you do not ask questions, all this training will be wasted 3 years from now. I'm very sure some of you have already got capacity building training in the last 3 years or 4 years. You have collected your per diem, and today as well, you will get your per diem. But it is all wasted if, what I mean by wasted is it produces no paper, it produces no document, it produces no extra creative work. And that's partly because during the training, you didn't ask question. And therefore, nggak ada yang nyangkut, nothing left. It's all like memory from the past that leaves no trace whatsoever. Nggak ada yang nyangkut, di gigi pun nggak ada yang nyangkut. So I encourage you to ask Aldi, to ask Bagas, to ask Puguh, to ask Esa, if you do not want to ask me. But it's important, and to ask others, your fellow participants, yeah? Because otherwise you will get your per diem, but 3 years from now, you will remember nothing and produce no papers and no documents, and Indonesia will remain with millions of children malnourished, stunted, wasted, underweight. Okay, now let me open the floor. Any questions so far? Any comments so far? No? Okay. Let me just double check. Can you actually hear me?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Yes, Pak
Okay.
Indo, we can hear you.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Go on. I'm super excited to hear.
Don't worry about, I know you are all going to be very fearful of me, but I promise you, I do not bite. I will share my screen with you, and I hope you can see this. And if you cannot, just let me know. Yeah. Can you see the screen, and can you see the falling autumn leaves?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so
Yes,
I'm
sir.
going to talk about double burden of malnutrition in Indonesia. We will play it by ear. I may not finish this, but as Pa Sus said, we're going to have a break somewhere in the middle. And as I promise you, the 5 hours is not, you're not going to just listen to me, but we will have 2 sessions. And I will decide the break later on. And then you play a little bit with seeing the data, and we'll continue afterwards. So I'm going to share with you about double burden of malnutrition in Indonesia. And the aim are twofold. One is to show you for the first time how damaging this is for Indonesia. And secondly, to familiarize yourself with what is going to happen in the next few days, with the data, with the analysis. What I am going to ask you to do in your data analysis, I will show you how I did it, is to produce some of these things that I'm going to show you. So these are some of the things that I produce when I advise ministers. I advise ministers here in the UK. In Indonesia, they don't want to listen to me. But this is the kind of things that I produce. You will see the kind of evidence that gets into policy documents. In the UK, we have policy research unit where I'm in. And so this is the kind of things, or how we produce evidence. Yeah. So on double burden of malnutrition, this is it. Let me ask you a question first. Assuming in a few decades, another pandemic is going to kill millions worldwide, including 200,000 Indonesians in 1 year. What one thing President Joko Widodo should do now? What do you think? Jokowi should do what? Yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes. And at the bottom, I promise you that I knew what he should do. When I say I knew, it's on the 14th of December. And I'll show you what Jokowi just did last month or 2 weeks ago. And yes, you can test my answer, much like you test your fellow participants' answer. How do you test it? Ask, if Jokowi had done that in 2014, when he came to power, would Indonesian deaths today be fewer than 150,000? Yeah. So I'm waiting. You have 5 minutes. Mahfum, ngerti?
Yes, sir.
Halo? Ah,
Yes, sir. I will.
yeah. Coba.
We're typing.
What should Jokowi do in 2014? And I'll tell you what he should have done and what he did 2 weeks ago, about 7 years late. Boleh tanya sama teman-teman. Lockdown. I don't have any idea. He should learn from the prediction. How is that prediction was created? If Jokowi learned from that prediction and how was it created, would Indonesian deaths today would be fewer than 150,000? lockdown. Di Indonesia banyak pakai diesel, jadi panasnya lama. Jadi nggak apa-apa, kita tunggu. Would you like to have Jokowi lock Indonesia down in 2014? Ask the experts to do research how to avoid the number of victims. Should regulate at the next level of PPKM. Vaccine. So in 2014, what should be done about vaccine? Set aside money to build vaccine factories, to build vaccine research. He should listen to health experts. Herd immunity, so let people die, and those who survived are immune. Invest in next generation testing. In 2014, this year. Vaccinated and limited foreign. So in 2014, vaccination, but the virus was not there yet. Strengthen healthcare facilities and universal health coverage. Should read the data how pandemic happened in history. Women empowerment. Invest more money to build established health system. Effective surveillance. Now this gets more interesting. This gets more preparation, anticipation. Surveillance. Yep. Human development, right? Health regulation. Look at the determinants relies on the pandemic. Okay, so the determinants of pandemic and do plan. Okay. So 1 more minute. And then I'll play you a video, 2 videos in fact. And then you tell me whether what I suggested was sensible or not. Well, at least Jokowi thought that's sensible. Okay, so let me join you again. Are we all on the same page now? Yeah. So what I did in December 14th last year, that's a Monday, I was invited to give a talk at Faculty of Medicine at Gadjah Mada. And people easily forget, but December last year, there was no vaccines yet, yeah, in Indonesia. And so I helped to prepare some people to think through, if there were vaccines in Indonesia, what should be done to distribute it fairly and to the best of public health purpose. Yeah. So I'm going to stop this one and I will share you the video of that presentation. Okay. Only 3.5 minutes, not the whole, only 3.5 minutes. And then I will argue and show you what Jokowi did 10 months later, which is 30th of October. So in December, I said something, and about 10 months later, something happened. Okay, is that fair enough? Can you follow that? Okay, so let me try to share with you the video. Let me see whether I can do this. Can you all see my screen which says Pusat Kebijakan dan Manajemen Kesehatan? Can someone?
Yes.
Okay, let me
Yes.
play this. If you cannot hear the video, the sound, let me know straight away. Yeah. Sorry, let me just repeat this because I forgot to tick the box on share sound. So I'm sure you can see the screen, but I hope you can hear the sound as well. It's only 3.5 minutes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore Bapak Ibu sekalian. Salam sehat untuk kita semua. Perkenalkan, saya Tri Muhartini yang akan menjadi MC untuk pertemuan sore kita hari ini. Judul kegiatan kita hari ini adalah Logistik Vaksin COVID-19 untuk Studi Kasus di Inggris. Dengan topik ini, kita akan mendiskusikan tentang logistik vaksin COVID-19 terkait penyimpanan dan pendistribusiannya, yang dimana kita akan belajar dari pengalaman di Inggris. Nah, sebagaimana yang Bapak Ibu telah ketahui bahwa topik ini juga sedang menjadi perhatian publik di Indonesia, karena berita terbaru bahwa pemerintah Indonesia sudah mulai mempersiapkan vaksin COVID-19 ini. Untuk itu, kita akan belajar juga dari pengalaman di Inggris dan kita harapkan juga dapat diimplementasikan di Indonesia. Baiklah, Bapak Ibu sekalian, sebelum kita memulai diskusi hari ini, saya terlebih dahulu akan mempersilahkan kepada Prof. Laksono Trisnantoro selaku Ketua Board dari PKMK FKKMK UGM untuk menyampaikan pembukaan diskusi kita hari ini. Saya persilakan Prof. Laksono.
Soaring prices, massive shortages.
Sorry.
What's next? Hi, I'm Chris Hurt here.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Selamat sore dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. untuk Pak Gindo, selamat pagi Pak ya. Jam berapa di Pak Gindo? Jam 8:30 ya, jam 9 ya. Oh, 9 ya. Pak Rudolf di mana?
Di Jakarta, Pak.
Jakarta ya. Ya. Oke, jadi hari ini kita mendapat dua pembicara yang sangat kompeten dalam bidangnya, yaitu Pak Rudolf Saud ya. Dia adalah seorang ahli logistik ya. Ahli logistik dari Samudra Logistics JEC ya. Kemudian Pak Gindo Tambopulon dari University of Manchester. Seperti kita ketahui, hari-hari ini kita semua orang di dunia ya, kita dan semua orang di dunia ya, itu sibuk untuk mendengarkan ataupun melihat ataupun mengikuti bagaimana progres COVID-19 ini berjalan, termasuk, nah ini, vaksinnya ini. Ya.
Nah, itu pembukaan. Saya akan sampaikan apa yang saya sampaikan di depan halayak. Kira-kira lebih seminggu lalu saya membagikan ke kawan-kawan di Indonesia foto-foto tentang vaksinasi pertama dan orang-orang yang divaksinasi di Inggris. Dan ketika itu Pak Laksono langsung menanggapi, bagaimana kalau kita bicarakan soal vaksinasi ini di Inggris untuk dijadikan bahan pelajaran di Indonesia. Lantas saya bilang, wah itu ada ahlinya, bukan saya. Ahlinya itu Pak Rudolf. Pak Rudolf ini bukan cuma ahlinya, tapi lebih penting lagi itu dia kawan saya. Satu tempat tidur malah. Kalau saya ke Bandung, saya tidur di rumahnya Pak Rudolf. Jadi ini, tapi bukan berarti ini nepotisme ya. Itu memang karena beliau ahlinya, makanya saya berteman dengan dia. Gitu. Baik, saya coba membagi screen saya. Mudah-mudahan kelihatan ya. Pak Yos bisa lihat?
Bisa, Pak Gindo, silakan.
Oke. Ini pembagian vaksin di Inggris dan pelajaran buat Indonesia. Saya harus sebut juga bahwa bukan hanya dari Inggris pelajaran yang akan coba saya tarik, tetapi juga dari pengalaman Indonesia. Karena saya dan mitra di Manchester ini, Asri Maharani juga pernah melakukan penelitian mengenai vaksinasi anak di Indonesia selama 35 tahun terakhir. Dan saya punya waktu sekitar 25 menit. Pelajaran yang ingin saya tinggalkan cuma satu. Indonesia itu akan gagal membagi vaksin COVID-19 ini. Dan karena Indonesia akan gagal, saya beritahu ukuran kegagalannya. Ukuran kegagalannya adalah ini. Orang Dayak di Kalimantan dibandingkan orang Dayak di Borneo, itu orang Dayak di Kalimantan akan ketinggalan 2 bulan mendapatkan vaksin yang sama manjurnya dengan orang Dayak di Borneo. Dan kalau 2 bulan itu cukup banyak orang yang mati. Walaupun vaksinnya itu udah di depan hidung. Jadi cuma itu pesannya, bahwa Indonesia akan gagal. Dan ukuran gagalnya itu, orang Dayak di Kalimantan akan ketinggalan dibandingkan dengan orang Dayak di Borneo 2 bulan paling tidak. Mungkin setengah tahun, tapi 2 bulan paling tidak. Kalau dibandingkan orang di Jakarta dengan orang di Kuala Lumpur, nah itu sih semua juga bisa. Kalau orang Jakarta dibandingkan dengan orang Bangkok, nah itu sama-sama dapat, itu sih semua juga bisa. Yang jadi persoalan adalah orang di daerah. Nah, saya yakin orang Dayak di Kalimantan itu akan ketinggalan dibandingkan orang Dayak di Borneo. So I set out the problem in Indonesia then because of the spatial disparity between Java and outside Java, the problem in Indonesia would lead to many more deaths. And in that talk, I mentioned 1,000 or a couple of thousand deaths. But of course, I was wrong. I was too careful. Now you know that Indonesia has 150,000 deaths. That's if they counted it. Yeah. So that's one thing. Now, of course, as I mentioned, 10 months later, what happened? So I'll share you that one. Can you all see this a video of Jokowi?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for joining us, Bapak President. Almost 150,000 people died in Indonesia because of COVID, and those are just the official figures. The unofficial count is thought to be much higher than that. While you are managing things better now, initially, your government downplayed the disease and as a result, didn't recognize the dangers till much later. How responsible is your government for these deaths that we've seen in Indonesia?
Ya, memang pada saat puncak kasus kita, sehari saat itu ada 56.000 kasus, dan sekarang sudah turun menjadi 600. Dulu 56.000 kasus, memang rumah sakit kita, fasilitas kesehatan kita penuh dan tidak mampu menampung. Saat itulah memang terjadi kematian yang sangat banyak, hampir 2.000 per hari, tetapi saat ini sudah bisa kita tekan, bisa kita kendalikan.
When you look back, what do you think were some of the biggest mistakes that were made by your administration in managing this?
Menurut saya fasilitas kesehatan kita yang belum baik. Ini yang akan kita perbaiki dengan reformasi di bidang kesehatan Indonesia, utamanya fasilitas kesehatan, kemudian peningkatan pembangunan SDM yang lebih merata seluruh Indonesia. Ingat bahwa fasilitas kesehatan di Jawa dengan di luar Jawa itu sangat perbedaannya sangat jauh sekali. Ini yang ingin kita kejar.
Okay. So, can you all follow that so far? What I said 10 months ago is that there's a big problem in Indonesia, the disparity between places, Java and outside Java, the disparity between areas in health facilities. And this will lead to failure in responding to shocks like pandemic, and will lead to many more deaths that are not necessary had this been solved much earlier. Yeah. So the host of my talk in Gadjah Mada, as you have seen, Pak Laksono Trisnantoro, when Jokowi, 2 weeks after the 14th of December, replaced the Minister of Health, Laksono Trisnantoro also become the special advisor to the new Minister of Health. So I'm not surprised that the issue of the disparity between places in Indonesia is an issue that is very much close to the heart of policymaking in health in Indonesia today, unlike 10 months ago. And one evidence of that, as you just heard in the first minute of Jokowi's response to questions about failure and about how to improve, the first thing he said was to deal with the disparity between places in Indonesia. I'm not saying that I'm the only one who pointed this out, but it is very clear how it relates to pointing out the problem in disparities between places in Indonesia, the deaths that are entirely preventable, and the actions on health policy of the government. Okay, so I will continue to share my talk now. Can you all see my slide?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Now, this is in 2015, a piece of work done by the World Bank in Indonesia. It's about the same time as my paper. Okay. Before I move on to the next, I just want to recap a few things from that piece by the World Bank. 1/3 of Indonesian children under 5 were stunted, but then public awareness is low. And we know that stunting or other form of malnutrition can reduce a person's productivity at a young age as they enter the labor force, as they work during their prime working age, and later on increase the risk of illness or the risk of developing non-communicable diseases at older age, such as cardiovascular diseases. And that's what the World Bank called the double burden. The burden on productivity and the burden on health. Yeah. So just as a side note, there is another definition of double burden of malnutrition, which I use and fellow researchers in public health use. The alternative definition is a combination of underweight and overweight in a family. So a father who is obese has a child who is stunted. That's a definition of double burden of malnutrition that researchers in public health tend to use. I also use it, but for the talk today, I'm going to use the definition from the World Bank. Why? Because whatever definition you use, Indonesia appears bad. So I choose the definition that is easier to work with. I hope that is understandable. There are two definitions of double burden, but whatever definition you pick, Indonesia appears bad in both of them. Therefore, I choose a definition that is easier, not the definition that I used to work with in my papers. Okay, let me just stop here to give you an opportunity to comment or ask me questions before we move on. Any questions so far? You understand that? Is it too shocking? Is it like watching a horror film? Okay, I assume you all understand that so far, yeah? Okay. So, picking up on that, a definition of double burden of malnutrition that I use in this talk is one that the World Bank use, slightly different from one that typically I use in my work. So this is the work that I mentioned. I typically use a definition that is rather different. You can see the definition that I used there on the bottom left in a different color. Yeah, so this dual burden or double burden, which may also exist within a single household. That's the definition that I use in this paper, the double burden of malnutrition in Indonesia. But for today, I use the World Bank definition. It's easier. If I use that definition, this is from that paper, you will get to see this kind of maps of Indonesia, which, by the way, showed you the disparity between Java and outside Java. But you are welcome to read the paper in your leisure time. I'm pretty sure you will get a copy of that paper in your training pack. If not, ask Bagus to give you that. So let me continue with what is the reason why malnutrition is bad. Shortness, stunted, is not the real problem. When it comes to stunting, other processes in the body are also stunted, such as brain development, which affects intelligence. This is Professor Endang Akhadi from the University of Indonesia. And that's the reason why I look at intelligence later on. I'll show you the effect. Children also have lower grades in school, and they may not be able to go kuliah, go to university, yeah. Or if they go to university, they may drop out, yeah, which is bad for everybody for all the investment that has been put in place. What drives this double burden of malnutrition? So far, what I've been talking about is the consequences of this double burden of malnutrition, but what drives it? Yeah. So not only what are the consequences, but also what drives it. One is an increase in food availability, in especially processed foods, doubling the amount of fat we consume. We know that. Some cities in Indonesia are not pedestrian friendly. And therefore, it doesn't encourage physical activity. I remember a few years ago when I walk, I used to walk from my university accommodation to my campus, Dago Pojok Ganesa, along a road called Dago. And the road in Indonesia is designed for cars, not for walking. And therefore, every time in front of a house, the pavement for the pedestrian goes down because the car can go in easily and then goes up again, and then goes down and then goes up again. So easy for cars, not easy for walking. So many cities are not pedestrian friendly, including Bandung and Dago. Yeah, I don't know where you come from, but this is my experience in Indonesia. Cities are not pedestrian friendly. And there are many other, but not only the physical, not only the nutritional, but also norms, social norms as well, shape the context which allows malnutrition or health of mothers and young child to be compromised. Yeah, social norms influence many women to marry while still very young in some parts of Indonesia, not all. Now, this shaped their views about safe pregnancy and about how to raise a healthy child. So there are many causes of double malnutrition in Indonesia. Here is a figure from the World Bank that is lodged in my mind, and I want to do something about it. And they say losses due to malnutrition are estimated to be 2% of Indonesia's gross domestic products. I don't know how they got this number, but it is something that lodged in my mind. You may not know this, but 2% is really big because it's of GDP. And I'll show you later what do I mean by that. And I will show you how I make sense of this small, apparently small number of 2%. Yeah. At the end of this talk, at the end of these 2 days, you will see what I mean by 2% is a big number. I'm pretty sure you met Pak Dodi, who said that more cases of non-communicable diseases in Indonesia have caused higher expenditure for health insurance. And the highest costs are for treatment of cardiovascular diseases. Yeah. By the way, the first picture, the first evidence of unmet need for cardiovascular care in Indonesia is a paper I wrote in 2014. You can read it in the database that I mentioned earlier. The title is Unmet Need for Cardiovascular Care in Indonesia. So, and you may not know this, but it is true that actually deaths, the highest, comes from non-communicable diseases, not infectious diseases. Yeah, 60% of deaths is actually from non-communicable diseases. And you may know by now that even COVID actually is much more dangerous among people with non-communicable diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular condition. I hope you know that. Yeah. So that's the consequences of double burden of nutrition. Even in peaceful time without pandemic, it is bad enough. And especially in pandemic, it hits people with non-communicable precondition. Yeah. Okay. Now, as a researcher, I respond to this by finding evidence. And that's my job today, to introduce you to ways to find evidence using software that is standard. The WHO is one of those organizations that supervise or that leads or that guides, that provide context to help countries around the world to deal with health problems. And one of the things that they do, you know a lot about their work on vaccines and so on, but one of the things that they do is they publish software to help countries analyze public health surveys so that those countries know the prevalence of malnutrition, the prevalence of stunting, the prevalence of overweight, and so on. And they publish this in R and in Stata. I also know that other international organizations follow this lead. They follow this lead by using WHO software to process their data when they want to find out the rate of malnutrition in nearly 200 countries. For example, the UN United Nations Development Program, and I'll show you the example, an example later. Yeah. However, other group, not only WHO, other group also, in response to the challenge of malnutrition, publish alternative software for the same purpose. And I tell you, this is easier to use. I use them both, the WHO one and the Z-Anthro from Vidmar's group. I use them both, and I recommend to use Z-Anthro instead of the WHO, yeah, because it's easier and much more compact. But I mentioned this so that you know the background. Why do we do all this? Okay, I don't expect you to understand all this, and you will meet this later in today, tomorrow, or in your lab session. But the point here is this is the kind of work that is needed to use WHO software. Long, very long, quite detailed, quite involved. Yeah, I use it to compute the rate for Nigeria in 2017. Don't ask me why I compute for Nigeria. I do calculation for all countries around the world, as you know from the list of the papers that I wrote. But the point here is it's long, involved, and more complex if you use the WHO software. But this is included as part of that, two pages. So more than 100 lines. You see the number on the left, 61 all the way down to 115, it's the number of lines. Whereas if I use the second software from Vidmar et al., I don't know whether you can see my cursor. I hope you can see my cursor, from Susanna Vidmar et al. And Tim Cole and Hiki Pan. It's a lot shorter. This is how short it is. Yeah, less than 10 lines. So the point here is, if you use the WHO ones, very long, very involved, but you're welcome to. If you want me to send you this code, I'll send you. But I encourage people to use this alternative software because it's easy, less than 10 lines. Yeah. So this is the one that you're going to be working with. All the assistants will help you to do this. Okay. Let me stop there first because I want to open up the space for people to ask questions and comments before we go to the exercise. Boleh nanya dalam bahasa Indonesia, kalau takut dalam bahasa Inggris.
Saya boleh tanya Pak Gindo?
Boleh tanya.
Baik, perkenalkan, nama saya Indrawati Putra. Oke, saya pernah di Sheffield di S2. Jadi saya akan tanya bahasa Indonesia. Begini, jadi Pak Gindo akan mengajarkan kepada kita tentang menganalisis data besar dengan memakai Stata. Tapi kemudian saya melihat bahwa Stata ini hanya sampai hanya untuk 1 minggu. Jadi maksudnya apakah sesudah ini kita mudah-mudahan kita akan familiar dengan apa ini, dengan program ini. Tapi sesudah itu kami harus memakai dengan berbayar kah atau bagaimana? Itu saja pertanyaan saya. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Ibu. Jadi jawabannya adalah mesti bayar. Ya, karena memang yang ini ADB dan Departemen Kesehatan ya yang menjadi sponsornya, ya. Karena memang sponsornya ini tidak menyediakan lisensi itu, gitu. Tidak menyediakan lisensi itu. Jadi bahkan tidak menyediakan training ini. Gitu. Jadi karena mereka tidak menyediakan training ini, saya waktu itu bilang sama sponsor ini, ya kasihan kalau nggak di training mengolah datanya. Kalau cuma mendengar cerita, semua juga sudah dengar cerita, mesti diajar mengolah datanya. Nah, saya mau mengajar mengolah datanya, gitu. Nah, tapi saya nggak punya uang untuk memberikan semua penduduk Indonesia lisensi Stata. Tetapi saya punya kemampuan untuk memberikan kalian lisensi Stata gratis selama 7 hari. Itu bukan ADB yang kasih itu. Ini atas nama saya. Sesudah 7 hari itu, ya saya nggak mungkin membeli lisensi Stata untuk kalian semua. Wong saya sudah membeli lisensi Stata untuk kalian 7 hari. Ya. Nah, waktu saya dulu di Bandung, saya nabung untuk beli lisensi saya memang. Karena saya tahu dulu semua teman-teman saya itu membajak software. Astagfirullah. Ya, banyak itu ya di Indonesia ya. Tetangga kita ya, yang di kantor sebelah itu kan membajak software itu kan, itu. Tapi saya enggak, dari Bandung pun saya enggak. Nah, untuk membantu Indonesia, saya bawa software ini ke kalian semua. Semua kalian akan dapat ini lisensi ini. Betul tidak? Pak Aldi, betul?
Benar.
Iya.
Iya,
Ya.
Pak, sudah dapat semua, Pak.
Dapat semua ya?
Yang 120 peserta, Pak. Ya.
120 peserta atas nama Gindo Tampu Bolon itu, bukan atas nama ADB, bukan atas nama Departemen Kesehatan. Saya kasih kalian gratis 7 hari. Sesudah itu saya nggak punya uang. Nasib kalian lah itu.
It was a honor, Pak.
Oke,
Ya.
baik, terima kasih.
Iya. Jadi kalau mau memperbaiki Indonesia, mungkin beli lisensi. Gitu. Saya sudah membeli lisensi untuk 120 orang, 7 hari. Terima kasih, Bu.
Sama-sama, terima
Ada-
kasih banyak, Pak Gindo. Ya.
Ada pertanyaan lagi?
Pak Gindo, siang.
Monggo. Monggo.
Pak, apakah jelas?
Nggak jelas, makanya saya bilang sama panitia, tolong dibelikan itu internet yang rada becus. Saya udah mahal dibayar, kalian nggak bisa mendengar saya atau saya nggak bisa mendengar kalian. Rugi kan?
Iya,
Modal sedikit.
Pak Gindo,
Ya,
izin nanti akan dianalisis stat besar menggunakan dengan long survei ya. Nah, dengan long survei data survei untuk implementasi kami di lapangan, kami kembali ke daerah, apakah ada potensi menganalisis menggunakan data daerah?
oh, oke. Bu Nur kedengeran nggak atau putus-putus?
Saya nggak dengar, putus-putus.
Ah, gitulah. Aduh, cemara kalian. Sudah saya bilang kemarin itu dibenerin internetnya. Jadi coba saya tebak ya, pertanyaanmu adalah, kalau pertanyaan ini saya salah dengar, bilangin ya. Kalian ini jarang kalian punya kesempatan ketemu sama saya. Jadi kalian benerin di internet kalian. Nah, pertanyaannya begini. Kan dalam beberapa hari ini saya ngajarin kalian pakai, dalam bahasa Indonesia mau dalam bahasa Inggris? Dalam bahasa Indonesia aja ya, biar kalian ngerti ya, biar nggak salah tafsir ya. Dalam beberapa hari ini saya akan ngajarin kalian mengolah data longitudinal. Tapi kalian kan akan pulang ke daerah. Akan lebih sering kebutuhannya mengolah data daerah. Apakah ini akan bisa dipakai? Begitu pertanyaannya.
Betul. Iya, betul. Ya. Betul, Pak.
Betul, oke. So, ya karena kalau mau menasihati menteri, kita mesti ngerti dulu pertanyaannya apa. Gitu. Nah, ini contohnya. Jadi saya mau memastikan saya ngerti pertanyaanmu. Jawabannya adalah, ini kepake. Baik di daerah. Percaya atau tidak, ini juga kepake. Baik di Amerika. Percaya atau tidak, ini juga yang saya pakai memberi nasihat kepada pemerintah Inggris. Bukan cuma pemerintah Kabupaten Malang, misalnya. Jadi percayalah, ilmu ini kepake di mana-mana. Itu menjawab. Halo?
Ke arah nanti. Halo Pak, iya. Maksudnya nanti ke arah data yang dianalisis memang
ke arah data yang dianalisis memang gimana?
Harus longitudinal.
Harus longitudinal kah? Oh, enggak. Ini hanya contoh. Dalam prakteknya, let me see whether I can show you, whether I can give you an exercise that is not longitudinal. Ini tidak harus longitudinal. Ini cross-sectional pun bisa. Jadi ada bagian dari latihannya nanti yang hanya melihat yang cross-sectional pun bisa. Cukup menjawab?
Baik.
Tadi ada Bapak yang udah mengangkat tangannya. Pak Aris
Saya,
ya?
Prof.
Monggo.
Selamat siang, Prof. Tambu Bolon.
Selamat siang.
Saya senang ini. Narasumbernya luar biasa. Intonasinya juga luar biasa. Meskipun saya tidak terlalu paham apa yang disampaikan, tapi saya
kemana ini? Luar biasa, tapi nggak ngerti. Ayo, terus.
Tapi saya, poinnya sudah saya tangkap, Prof. Ada dua pertanyaan. Yang pertama tentang double burden malnutrisi tadi. Sebenarnya itu sudah jamak difahami oleh orang Indonesia. Cuman ada satu fase pada balita itu, ada satu fase memang anak itu sulit untuk makan. Ini pertanyaannya bagaimana intervensi yang harus dilakukan supaya anak itu pada fase dia tidak mau makan bisa mengkonsumsi lebih banyak sebagaimana anak-anak yang normal. Itu poin pertama. Poin yang kedua, di dalam analisis menggunakan statistik itu kan ada dalilnya itu. Yang pertama besarnya hubungan. Yang kedua tentang konsistensi. Nah, di dalam analisis stokastik itu kan ada uncertainty, itu ketidakpastian. Sehingga ketika kita menganalisis dengan variabel yang sama, variabel independen dan variabel dependen, itu satu sisi dia signifikan dengan besaran signifikansi yang cukup besar. Di sisi yang lain dengan subjek yang berbeda itu analisisnya justru berkebalikan. Nah, pertanyaannya begini, bagaimana mensikapi inkonsistensi dalam analisis statistik itu? Terima kasih, Prof.
Terima kasih, Pak Aziz. Saya kira semuanya nangkap pertanyaan Pak Aziz yang jelas itu ya, dan itu pertanyaan-pertanyaan penting. Untuk menjawab pertanyaan pertama, saya harus mengakui bahwa saya bukan ahli nutrisi, sehingga saya tidak tahu kira-kira intervensi yang paling pas untuk umur tertentu supaya anak mau makan dan gizinya, asupannya jadi lebih baik. Tapi selain dari itu sebabnya kita memperhatikan, saya tidak mengatakan tadi, WHO itu punya growth curve. Jadi pertumbuhan anak dalam bukan hanya sehari, bukan hanya dalam sebulan, bukan bertahun-tahun. Jadi kalaupun dia misalnya di bulan tertentu di bawah kurva itu, kita tidak terlalu khawatir bila growth curve-nya itu selama 5 tahun itu masih cukup bagus gitu. Jadi itu sebabnya kita selalu memperhatikan bukan hanya anak umur sebulan, 2 bulan, 3 bulan, dan seterusnya, tapi beberapa tahun. Jadi, kalaupun ada macet, kalaupun ada mandek, atau kalaupun ada kelebihan pada bulan-bulan tertentu, asalkan growth curve-nya itu secara keseluruhan dalam rata-rata plus minus 1 standar deviasi, gitu. Buat kita itu tidak mengkhawatirkan, ya. Bahkan stunted itu kan batasannya sebetulnya kalau dia menyimpang di bawah 3 standar deviasi. Kalau nggak sampai segitu kita cincai lah, oke? Kira-kira gitu yang pertama, ya. Nah, yang kedua, saya kira itu betul bahwa kita selalu memperhatikan apakah konsisten temuan kita ini mengenai malagizi. Malagizi itu terjemahannya malnutrition. Apakah konsisten temuan kita mengenai malagizi ini, dan apakah besarannya itu masuk akal temuan kita mengenai malagizi ini dalam sampel-sampel tertentu, gitu. Nah, saya nggak terlalu khawatir dengan analisis ini karena 2 hal. Pertama, saya memberi sintaks saya ke para asisten, jadi kalian bisa minta kalau kalian mau, sehingga dipakai dimanapun sampelnya nanti, hasilnya mesti konsisten, gitu. Sayangnya begitu, maksudnya begini, sayang. Kalau saya sih pengennya, waktu saya nulis makalah itu tahun 2015, kira-kira 2-3 tahun kemudian di Indonesia itu beres. Sehingga kalau saya analisa sekarang, hasilnya akan lain. Yang menyedihkan, kalau saya analisa sekarang di Indonesia hasilnya masih parah juga. Konsisten, menyedihkan. Gitu loh, Pak. Kita itu konsisten, tapi konsistennya menyedihkan. Walah, nasib. Ada pertanyaan lain?
Nggak, maksud saya gini, Prof.
Apa?
Ya, itu antara satu analisis dengan analisis yang lain, dengan subjek yang berbeda, tetapi variabelnya sama, tetapi hasil analisisnya itu berbeda dalam signifikansinya. Satu variabel signifikan di daerah lain, satu variabel justru tidak signifikan di daerah yang lain. Nah, bagaimana kita di dalam merekomendasikan pada pengambil kebijakan itu? Terima kasih.
Ya. Kalau seperti itu, saya sedang mengalami itu. Dan jawabannya, saya kasih tahu konteksnya, ya. Nanti saya kasih tahu pesannya. Oke? Mudah-mudahan semua mengerti bahwa pertanyaan Pak Aziz ini dalam 2 sampel kita menganalisis barang yang sama, variabelnya sama. Dalam 1 sampel hasilnya katakanlah negatif. Dalam 1 sampel lagi katakanlah hasilnya sama sekali tidak ada, 0, ya, tidak negatif dan tidak positif, ya. Oke, jadi tidak konsisten. Apa yang akan kita katakan kepada pembuat kebijakan kalau tidak konsisten macam gini, gitu ya Pak Aziz, ya. Nah, saya lagi menganalisa dampak perubahan iklim terhadap nutrisi ibu dan anak, gitu. Nah, di Amerika iklim itu tidak lagi mempengaruhi nutrisi ibu dan anak, gitu. Jadi kalaupun iklimnya itu suhunya tinggi sekali, curah hujannya itu baik kemarau maupun hujan, itu sama sekali nggak ada lagi pengaruhnya terhadap asupan gizi ibu, asupan gizi atau status gizi anak. Tidak ada lagi pengaruhnya. Sementara di Indonesia itu masih ada pengaruhnya. Saya baru menghitung, ya, sehingga ibu cenderung melahirkan anak yang di bawah 2,5 kilogram lahirnya, ya. Jadi mempengaruhi asupan ibu. Suhunya sama, variasinya, ya. Rainfall-nya sama, curah hujannya sama, variasinya, dan ukuran bayinya sama ditimbang, dan patokannya 2,5 kilo, 2,5 kilo juga. Tapi di Amerika itu tidak pengaruh, di Indonesia itu berpengaruh buruk. Well, tidak konsisten. Kalau gitu apa yang kita katakan? Jawabannya adalah itu sebabnya kita perlu konteks yang lebih luas. Memang di Indonesia kita itu masih sangat tergantung pada alam. Kalau di Amerika mereka tidak lagi tergantung pada alam. Sehingga walaupun alam gonjang-ganjing, bumi gondal-gandul gitu, mereka bisa melindungi asupan istri dan anak. Di Indonesia, alam itu marah sikit, ibu itu melahirkan bayi yang beratnya kurang dari 2,5 kilo. Gitu. Konteks itu menentukan. Gitu. Jadi pesannya adalah, kalaupun tidak konsisten, bukan berarti analisisnya salah, tapi kita mesti mencoba mencari konteks yang lebih luas mengapa demikian. Ya, begitu?
Ya.
Ada
Apa
pertanyaan
perlu
berikut?
dilakukan meta-analisis, Prof?
Oh, nggak harus selalu ke sana. Jadi tidak harus selalu jawabannya itu teknis. Karena belum tentu memang itu yang terjadi sehingga ada perbedaan. Nggak harus. Tapi ya itu bisa dipertimbangkan. Ya, saya nggak bilang nggak boleh, tapi nggak harus gitu. Kadang-kadang konteksnya itu justru yang lebih menentukan. Ya.
Oke, terima kasih Prof. Tampu Bolon.
Ada yang lain lagi?
Prof, saya Sugeng.
Monggo.
Baik, terima kasih Prof. Bapak Profesor Tampu Bolon. Senang sekali bisa bertemu dengan ahlinya ini. Prof mau bertanya, ada dua hal nih. Yang pertama aspek aplikasi Stata. Konon kelebihan Stata dibanding aplikasi lain itu karena bisa memberi pembobotan. Saya belum paham apa pembobotan itu, apa yang dimaksud pembobotan pada aplikasi Stata. Yang pertama. Yang kedua kaitannya dengan program besar Presiden Pak Joko Widodo untuk menurunkan prevalensi stunting pada akhir 2024 menjadi 14%. Itu menurut pandangan Profesor bagaimana? Karena yang bermain di stunting kan intervensi sensitif. Yang konon intervensi sensitif itu jangka panjang. Tetapi 2024 tinggal 2 tahun lagi menghitung hari. Bagaimana pandangan Pak Tampu Bolon katanya dengan ya cita-cita besar Bapak Presiden secara realistis bagaimana, apakah memungkinkan? Bukan pesimis tapi mendapat dari Prof Tampu Bolon bagaimana kaitannya dengan cita-cita Bapak Presiden. Terima kasih Pak.
Mengenai Stata dan bobot, terima kasih Pak Sugeng. Kalau bobot itu nggak hanya di Stata, software yang lain pun bisa membobot kok. R pun bisa, banyak yang lain bisa. Jadi itu sama sekali nggak ada hambatan di situ. Jadi kalau Pak Sugeng pakai software yang lain bisa juga membobot di sana, gitu ya. Kenapa lantas saya pakai Stata, tidak pakai software yang lain? Karena gampang, dan saya tahu di Indonesia banyak orang yang pakai Stata, gitu aja, bukan apa-apa. Saya pakai Python di rumah, tapi kalau saya ngajarin kalian Python, walah nanti malah repot, ular sanca, gitu loh. Stata aja yang sudah ada dikenal, gitu, ya. Dan soal bobot, di mana-mana kalau pakai software yang lain juga ada pakai bobot. Kemudian yang kedua, saya terus terang agak miris ya mendengar bahwa 14% itu jadi sasaran. Kalau sasaran itu ya 0% gitu. Kalian nggak kasihan lihat anak-anak itu masih pendek, kurus, kerdil gitu. Kalian kan jalan-jalan ke Singapura atau ke Malaysia gitu, kan malu lihat anak-anak sana itu. Kita itu 14% kerdil gitu masih bangga jadi sasaran. Mestinya 0% gitu loh.
Cuman effortnya bagaimana, Prof?
Masa kalian nggak bisa ngerjain itu? Masa saya mesti turun lagi ngurusin itu? Yang lain, ada pertanyaan berikut. Pak Aris.
Saya sudah Prof yang tadi Prof.
Oh itu Pak, udah oke. Oh tadi masih right. So what I'm going to share with you now is what I want you to play with. And can you all see this? Yeah? Can you all see this?
Yes, above.
Okay. So you will work with Public Health Survey data, Indonesia Family Life Survey, and I will tell you a little bit more tomorrow about why I use this, and in more detail, but briefly, this is widely used by many people, including by my group. I mentioned earlier that this is, we did the first prevalence study of cardiovascular care need in Indonesia. When the only Minister of Health who ever wrote in the Lancet, ya, kalian tahu siapa Menteri Kesehatan Indonesia satu-satu yang pernah menulis di Lancet?
Dr. Terawan ya?
Bukan. Narsia Mboy 2016, ya, tentang universal health coverage. So they cited my work on cardiovascular care need in Indonesia, and also on the double burden that I showed you earlier. And that one, the first prevalence study of cardiovascular care need in Indonesia, that one used Indonesia Family Life Survey. So in other words, what it means is this health survey data has helped me to find evidence of unmet need for cardiovascular care and shape your minister's thinking of what is needed by Indonesia on cardiovascular care, on non-communicable disease. Yeah, so that's how useful Indonesia Family Life Survey is. Yeah. And also it is used in a few double burden studies or on maternal health. So Fesgasemi from Umeå in Sweden, which I visited, Rahmi from Australia, Cameron from Melbourne, Australia. So many people use this. So I want to familiarize, I want to give you the opportunity to be familiar with this data set because it's important. You may be influencing the minister's thinking if you work with this data set. I also want you to play with only one wave. Yeah. And you are going to be asked to derive weight for age using Z-Anthro in Stata, not using WHO software. Why? Because using WHO software, you will need more than 10 lines, whereas if you use Z-Anthro in Stata, you will need fewer than 10 lines. Yeah. My codes are there. You can ask the assistants. Okay. Try first your own way, and you can look at it if you want to. Now, I asked you to look at stunting. So height for age, but you may want to stretch yourself to look at more than stunting, namely any stunting or underweight, how much damage it will do to Indonesia 20 years later. So the examples that I give in there only focus on stunting. But if you have insomnia, you cannot sleep at night, and you don't know what to do, you can play writing code to analyze what if not only stunting, but any stunting or underweight. In other words, any form of malnourished children. Yeah, see how it affects gross domestic products, depression, IQs, consumptions 20 years later. But that's only if you want to stretch yourself. Okay. Now, I want to move on to the next part of my talk, but this is the new research on malnutrition that I promised to show you. But I think you will, by now, require time to stretch yourself for 10-15 minutes. Is that a good idea?
Ya.
Ya?
Boleh Pak Gindo.
Ya, ya. Istirahat, rehat, saya nggak tahu jam sholat dan seterusnya, tapi 15 menit cukup atau mau lebih? Karena bagian berikutnya adalah temuan baru. Jadi ceritanya agak berbeda. Jadi saya mau istirahat dulu sekarang kalian supaya segar lagi.